Hey everyone, hope you all are doing well. My name is Ishan and welcome to the video. More like a podcast really, because we're trying out something new. If you're new to the channel, haven't explored before self-improvement activities and such, but also a lot on philosophy side and going into tangents and things, worrying about what life looks like. But this is my friend and I'm gonna let her introduce herself and we can dive right into the discussion for today.
Hi, it's me, Varnika, and today we're going to talk about time and whatever else comes to our head right after that. So, what do you think about time?
Wait, before we dive in, can you give everyone a little bit of intro of who you are, what you do, and what made you think about this topic of time for today's discussion?
Um, so, I try to make content on anything and everything I think of. I'm exploring my 20s, and a part of me exploring 20s is exploring spiritual side, science, and anything in between. And this segment is called the third realm, and the reason we're calling this third realm is both of us believe that, or I'm going to talk on your behalf, but both of us believe that we stem from a different space of duality, and the third realm is a space that's not judging but analyzing and observing these two dualities that exist within us, or like even several other spaces of dualities within us. That's why we're starting with time today.
All right. Yeah, let's just jump right in. What's been on your mind?
I have been so I saw this one TikTok that was talking about how this how there's this one tribal space that looks at time in a very different way than we think of time. That's one of the reasons I thought we should talk about time is so these tribal people, instead of looking at past in a linear sense that's past, present, future, where past is behind and present is now, and then future is in front of us. They think of time in a space where past is in front of us because we've seen the past, and the future is behind us. We don't know what's behind us, so they look at future in that space, and present is anything in this realm in front of us, like in the same realm as us. So that was kind of cool, and that's something I've been thinking about. That past is like anything we've been through, anything we've seen is in the past, but it's in front of us, but not behind us.
Can you tell me more about what tribe used to do this, and why is that the way that they look at time in that sense?
I said it was a TikTok, so TikTok was like 30 seconds long. I don't know that information yet. Check it.
Yeah, we're gonna try to exceed this part because I'm curious to know.
It's a tribal space that looks at past in front of them.
Looking at time in a non-linear way.
No, they look at it in a linear way. They just look at it in a different linear fashion because it's still linear, right? I'm still looking at.
Sure. So they're basically switching the past with the future.
Correct.
And just putting that around. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Which tribe or I don't know belief systems look at time in a way where the past is what's in the front and future is behind us. Before we actually do that, I do want to comment and say, based on the very brief description that I've gotten, it's an interesting take, but I do think that there's a lot more nuance to it still, where the way that you describe like past, present, and future, like that's the traditional view of how most people see time. It's not in the most literal sense that it flows that way all the time. And coming from a science perspective, where I personally believe that past, present, and future are more simultaneous, and they're more parallel to each other than they are like separate. Like they all exist in some form at the same time.
Interesting.
It's just manifesting in different ways, which now seems very convoluted now that I've said it out loud. The other thing I wanted to say was the past is something very concrete, can't change it. The future, always in flux, can always be changed. But let's see what ChatGPT has to say about. Thank you, Sam Altman, for 4.0 and all the other versions. So this, let me not go on tangents.
Once you finish that, I want to know more about what you just said about past, present, and future existing.
Yeah, sure. Okay, the Aymara people of the Andes. An indigenous group primarily focused in the Andes region of South America have a unique temporal perspective. Blah, 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 blah. In their language and worldview, the past is conceptualized as being in front of them, while the future is behind them. It stems from the belief that the past is known and visible, akin to something directly in front of someone's eyes, while the future is unknown and therefore hidden in one's back. Yeah, no,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting take. Linguistic evidence. Oh, fancy stuff. Naya, which means in the Aymara language, could probably be butchering these words. Naya, which means eye or front, can also refer to the past. Kipa, which means behind or back, is associated with the future. The inversion of the commonly held Western temporal metaphor reflects their emphasis on lived experience and the tangible nature of history, as opposed to the uncertain and unseen nature of what is yet to come. Sure. Okay, so I think we understand what they're saying for the most part. But the thing is, why do we need to look at time in a certain way? Why can't we just let it be how it is and keep living our lives?
Okay, before you get to that, I want to know where you were stemming from with all three existing at the same time, because I feel like there is an answer there.
I don't think there's a scientific way to prove that they all exist at the same time, but
time exists at the same time. We're using the word time to be able to describe that, right?
Wait, what do you mean?
Like, you're trying to talk about time existing at a particular time, like at an instance, right? Like all three existing at an instance at the same time.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, that's what I understood. So.
They can exist in the same fabric of reality.
Okay.
If you want to replace the word time itself, that's what I think. That's what I would have wanted to ideally say. But in a more realistic terms, or more human life views, or just the way we live life, the past is not just in the past because it's ingrained in us, it's ingrained in our habits, and it's somewhat ingrained in our DNA over the course of time, especially if we repeat certain thoughts and behaviors and patterns, right? So the past isn't just behind or in front, as the Aymara people would say. It is indeed part of the present in some capacity, for some people more so than others, through the ritualistic habits of doing certain routines or doing certain activities at a particular time. Same can be said about a future version of you by trying to envision, okay, what does my best version in the future look like and what does that guy do? And then if you emulate those habits today, you're basically driving yourself into your future version. So in that perspective, I think past, present, and future can coexist at the same time, or in the same instant, or in the same perceivable moment that we can sense with our five senses right now.
I think that's a philosophical take to time, which is
definitely,
which is great. But I don't know if that's more of what time is, more than like us trying to create a reality of what time is in our heads, because we're trying to use language to be able to describe what time is in our reality, so that way we're making it more subjective to than what it actually is.
So what is time?
That's what we're going to talk about.
What's your definition of time?
I don't know if I have a definition of time, but it's more of a the ideas in my head where I'm looking at time as if I look at a clock, then that's telling me time. I know what that is, and I know that time is something that's something like a coordination system that I'll use with you. Right? Say I decided to meet you at 3:30 p.m. today. So like more of a coordination system. But if I'm talking about time as like a dimension, then it's a completely different aspect. Versus if I'm talking about my past, present, future, then it's a completely different aspect. So it's like that there's so many aspects to time that depending on what space I enter, I will talk about it in a different way. No.
Yeah, you can look at it from very different angles. But there's also a distinction to be made where there are certain aspects of time that are social constructs and constructed by humans, so we make sense of the world better.
Okay.
So the example that you use for the meeting me at 3:30 or whatever, like that's completely socially constructed.
Okay.
That's not something that exists beyond Earth.
Correct.
But then there's other parts like
Like a
time as a
biological
dimension. But we would have to look into it, but I would argue that's also something that we personally created or life biologically evolved or adapted to certain things like the sun rising up and that's when you're more awake because it affects your hormones and stuff. But I think the concept itself of it being a biological clock, that's something that humans placed as a label, which if we didn't do that, then we could have described it another way. But then on the starting side, time as a dimension, like you said, that's a completely different story. But yet, at the same time, or fuck, we have to stop using the word time to describe other things. On the other side of things, time being a dimension is also something that the humans included in our physics and equations to make better sense of what we observe and see in the universe.
But that's entirety of physics, no? Like you're talking about anything that you talk about in physics is us trying to find patterns in our mind and use language into creating a model of what already exists. Like even stuff like a clock that we built or the words we use to talk about a clock is something that we constructed. It never really existed. The only concept of time we had before was the seasons changing or like it's day and night. That was, I'm assuming that was the only way you could talk about time, like several years ago when there was no clock.
Partially yes, but let's break down the fundamental word time itself. We're gonna ask ChatGPT what time is.
Okay.
And here's my basic understanding from physics stuff. Anytime perceivable matter or just matter in general, and matter is collapsed energy that's perceivable, that's why I said perceivable. Anyways, matter when it moves through physical space, that's what time is. Because if you have to go from one spot to another, there's no way that you can do that instantaneously. Like even if you have to walk somewhere for like 2 minutes, you just, that's a unit of measure of time that we use of how long it took for us to cover a specific amount of distance. But the same concept is applied in physics to pretty much everything. Whenever there's matter moving through space, time starts to, like, that is the true definition of what time would be. But let's see what the fuck ChatGPT has to say. Which it can always make mistakes, so check important information. What is time? Anything else you want to add to the question? Or should we?
No, just ask this one.
But I hate that it gives me like a long thing. So let's ask it to do.
Summarize for a 5-year-old baby.
Give a concise, 3 to 4 sentence summary, so that 5-year-old can understand it. Right, this is what we get. It's doing its thing.
Scientifically, what is time? Scientifically versus philosophically, what is time?
You gave a very bullshit answer, so we're gonna have to try again. Can you give it in actual concepts of physics and perhaps some philosophy?
You want to read it out?
Yeah, I love reading. Time is like a flow that helps us understand when things happen one after another. In physics, it's part of space-time, which means it's connected to where and how things move in the universe, like how a clock ticks differently on Earth than in space. Not the best example in my opinion, but keep rolling with it. Philosophers say time might not really flow, it could just be our way of thinking about changes around us. Some even wonder if time is just an illusion, like a story we tell to make sense of everything. And I feel like that summarizes pretty much the past few minutes of the back and forth of discussion that we just had.
It was better at concise.
Huh?
It was good at making that concise statement.
Yeah, it was almost like it was listening to us. But yeah, the clock one is
I have a question. Wait.
quite intriguing.
If I were to take a picture of both of us right now, like in this given moment, like I'm there and I'm taking a picture, I'm capturing in a assumably 2D plane whatever this 3D space is. But I'm not capturing time in that moment, but I'm still capturing time in some sense, right?
How are you capturing time in that?
Because say right now this sofa, this chair, if I move it there, it would when I took the picture this was here, but when I move it there, some time has passed and it's not like in an instant or whatever, some time passed. But the picture has not the picture has only captured us sitting here at that moment, right? I don't know if I explained that well.
Yeah, but I think that can easily tie into, well, first the thing that you mentioned, that you're trying to capture a 3D space into 2D.
Correct.
But then you think about this, if you add time as a dimension, then it's not just a 3D space anymore, it's a multi-dimension. It's more than 3D, because you can add other dimensions too, whatever. Apparently string theory says there's 11 dimensions, but anyways. But yeah, you're trying to capture something in an image, and I guess it doesn't entirely capture time.
But it does, in some sense. Because even the 3D space, it captures in some sense. Like it's like talking about if I have a 2D space, the minute I create a curvature in my 2D space, like if I have I'm using but this is like my piece of paper, and I'm assuming that this is my 2D space plane. If I create a bend, that bend is only visible in my 3D space as the bend. But if I'm looking at it from my 2D space, it just shows like it's a difference. Like if I'm just looking at it from the top, it's me looking at just the curve without looking at the curve.
Not entirely. This you should read more about space-time and how gravity also works and how the fabric of space-time is. Because what you just described is how Einstein described the motion of planets and why gravity bends light. So space-time itself is a fabric like this sheet of paper, and then you place an object in the middle of it, let's say a planet or a moon, that has some sort of specific mass, and it creates a bend in that paper. So now it's not just a flat space anymore, right? And that's like exactly what you just described. I think you'll find it interesting. But something that ties into this is also quantum mechanics, because when you said, in one moment you take the picture of us sitting and then you move the thing, that brings us to Schrodinger's cat and the observer effect, right? Like in that way, the camera is the observer, where as soon as the observer is shut off, where the camera is off, the world itself collapses into infinite possibilities, where the chair can be moved anywhere. It could be like 10,000 miles away, or you can just place it upstairs, or you can just place it behind the camera. So I think in that sense, it doesn't. I don't think it entirely captures time. It does exclude that dimension when you're taking a picture. It captures a moment,
but it doesn't capture time. But it does capture time. Like that, I think we're talking about two different times here. Like when we're talking about time being captured, we're talking about a different time than a time that we used to talk about in relation to other people, like the coordination aspect of time.
Yeah. Well, that one's definitely a completely separate piece. But then there's the other part of the human perception of time is very weird because our average lifespans are like 70, 80 years or something, right? Which if you consider the universe, it's like minute, like it's so small. That's barely anything. The universe itself is 13.7 or 8 according to 13.7 or 13.8 billion years old according to modern science, according to spiritual texts and stuff from Eastern world. It's way longer than that. It's supposed to be like trillions of years or something. So if you think about time in that way, for us, for a human, that's infinite time, basically. That's not even, we can't understand it.
Yeah.
But in some way, on a grander scale though, it is finite. It's not infinite. So that's another layer of perplexity that you can add with thinking about time. It doesn't have to be on the small scale of humans, but also
I think
grander scale.
So I've been thinking about this a lot recently. We started talking about the linearity aspect of time, like the looking at time in both ways, like past behind versus past like in front of us. I think Eastern mysticism talks about the circular nature of time. What are your thoughts on that?
Which Eastern, do you have any specific ones? Like which Eastern mysticism beliefs talk about time in a circular sense?
Currently, the only thing that's coming to my head is the Brahma Kumaris, because they talk about how, like, even Hinduism talks about it, but there's they talk about how every like 5,000. This is one of the things I know is that every 5,000 years is a specific segment that repeats itself. Like so, there if I look at a circle, because that's my circularity aspect, I divide it into 4. Those 5,000 years keep repeating itself every 5,000 years. So that way, looking at the same things that have happened before again, but like in a different way, but at the same time.
Yeah, and I guess this you can kind of relate this to the Bhagavad Gita as well, because it mentions how every specific set amount of years there's different yugs that occur. This does tie very slightly into what I said earlier about how humans repeat their patterns and behaviors. So sometimes we repeat the past and we can condition ourselves to become our future or be closer to our future selves. In that way, yes, I can see time being circular. But now that we've spoken about the universe, I'm having a hard time getting behind the idea that we need to, because even with the philosophical beliefs and spiritual systems and every single thing that we had, at the end of the day, it is mainly based on our perception of reality, right? Or some divine form's perception of earthly reality, or what we see here for the most part. And of course there's patterns and things that reoccur with time. I think that's a natural thing. Honestly, I think repetition and pattern is something that's embedded in the universe itself. I believe that, and I've thought about it very recently too. where things that are billions of miles apart, or kilometers, I guess, in either system, can be so similar. Classic example is just like solar systems. I mean, they're structured the same way, and we have an okay understanding of how they form, and enough to know that okay, this can happen in the this place. Like these are the conditions that are needed, like that sort of thing. But going back to this, that was a good tangent for me. I just think that everything that comes from any sort of belief system or spiritual place is again very grounded in human perspective, and sometimes it does focus on just our lives and not beyond that scale. And I think that circular notion of time is something that probably fits in very nicely with our human lives now, but on a grander scale, it probably fits. We just won't be around long enough to ever be able to decipher it.
But technically, okay, so the first thing that comes to my head with that isn't when I'm talking about, okay, firstly we'll start with perception of reality, where you said that we're repeating past in the future a lot of the times, like there'll be habits we create or things like that happen, so that we're continuously repeating things we did in the past, but I don't think that's true. Firstly, because I feel like you've lived that experience at least once to be able to know what that is. So you come to this new, like if I brushed my teeth yesterday versus if I'm brushing my teeth today, I know there's a little difference in that. Like if I brushed my teeth when I was 5 years old versus when I'm brushing my teeth now, there's a difference in how I will hold my brush, so there'll be something different, right? So it comes from learned experience. So there's a different space I'm coming with altogether. So that past is not the same as what I'm doing in my present. That's the first thing. Secondly, when I'm talking about, when I bring this philosophical notion into science, if I'm talking about the Earth revolving around the sun, the Earth rotating around the sun, isn't that me talking about the cycles repeating itself? Because if I hold this notion that I'm repeating the past,
yeah, seasons.
Correct, but am I saying that it's happening at the same time? Am I noting that time to be the same as our convention of time?
No, because
that's still happening at some time.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is also again where the human perception comes in, because the Earth is always slightly wobbling on its axis, and there's always this is why we have the leap year, right? Like every 4 years we have that extra day. Like why do we have that? It's because of this weird fluctuations with time that the Earth's not just rotation but also the revolution around the sun incurs. So in some way it is the same time for human perception, but if you take that out of the equation, there are very slight differences as to when even the seasons occur, right? Like every year that changes.
Yeah.
But then that's also dependent on the global Earth as a system and how we as humans are modifying certain things that are affecting the environment. Yes, environmental change is obviously real. Let's not deny that.
But then do you think that if at a given moment, like if at 4:30 p.m. I'm at sea level versus 4:30 p.m. I'm on top of Mount Everest, I'm experiencing the same 4:30 p.m.?
No, of course not.
So then so even as a coordination system, time is slightly flawed then.
Well, first, in that particular example, you'll have to define where the seafloor is, and then if it's in the same time zone as Mount Everest. But let's say for the sake of the discussion, it is. Part of this can actually tie into that clock example that ChatGPT gave us, because time as we know it behaves differently under the influence of gravity.
Okay.
So if you're closer to both points, force of gravity is related to the radius between two certain bodies. So yes, I think the distance, though that would probably be minute given Earth example, it probably won't amass too much difference. But yeah, if we were to take the clock in space, then it would make a bigger difference where that clock is going to tick slower. if you take it to somewhere that's even more, let's say you take a spaceship with a clock and you're traveling like near light speed but not at light speed, then by the time you go take a trip and come back, you're still going to be much younger compared to everyone else on Earth because you would have aged much slower. So yes, time, even as a coordinate system, is indeed flawed. Or I wouldn't say flawed, but I just think it's just based on human perception that's trying to make sense of what we can see and observe and to make our lives a little easier.
Okay, yeah, valid. I see it.
I honestly didn't know I could talk about time this much. That's crazy.